How did people make you feel when you started a new job, but you didn't have any experience? It's not a real comfortable feeling, and we value experience. In fact, we overvalue experience as we go through our careers. We're always measuring how much experience that person has compared to us or somebody else. And if we're using our experience to try new things and innovate, fine. But if we're just doing the same thing, if we're running a business, we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of having experience that really constrains our thinking. And I like this saying on the slide here is true innovation rarely comes from doing things more efficiently or faster. That might be good for business, but that's not necessarily good for critical thinking. And in this video, we're going to talk about Airbnb, one of the most notable physicists and mathematicians of the 20th century who refused to get a PhD, as well as the way you and I think about things. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, a retired Marine and founder of Desk Leadership Coaching. I did 21 years in the Marine Corps leading teams and transitioned out in 2013 into project management, engineering, and sales. I've been leading teams on that side ever since. So I've seen both sides, military and civilian, and I know some things that'll help you in your career that I learned in the Marine Corps. And in this video, the goal is to examine how we think and really examine how much value we should place on experience or whether a fresh point of view is what we really need. We're always trying to optimize our thinking, and we do this subconsciously. Think of it as we're conserving energy and brain power. Our brain's always looking to take shortcuts, and when we want to really think deep in something, you have to concentrate and work to push outside of where your brain is naturally going to go. That's why it's important to get into things that you enjoy, because that resistance is a lot less. And when we're faced with a problem to solve, what is that natural path? One of the cognitive biases we have is the Einstellung Effect. Think of this as becoming so good at solving a certain type of problem that you actually prevent yourself from considering other ways to solve that problem. One of the ways the research defines it is the mechanization of our mind. And while experience is useful to be efficient and fast, maybe in like running a business, if we're really looking to explore new ways of doing things, we have to be aware that our brain is pulling us in that familiar direction. And we also, as leaders, need to be aware of how much we're leaning on people with experience, because if you're looking for a new solution, maybe the person that you need is the one without quite as much experience in that topic. Because as we go through life and we rack up experience, naturally we're going to associate good experiences with success, and we're going to seek to avoid the risk of other situations or things that in the past have not worked. Those are going to be seen as negatives. We're going to try to avoid those at all costs. One way to think of it is the failures of the past, those really set the boundaries of where our mind is going to naturally flow. And you really need to consider, do you want those boundaries to be in place, or do you want to deliberately go beyond them and try something that didn't work in the past? Because maybe it was 10 years ago. Things are different now. Or maybe when whatever didn't work out before was just a matter of bad luck or chance. Those are real factors in life. So you want to think of yourself as a little bit of a rebel, and you want to be focused on how you acquire knowledge, which is what the word epistemic means. Is let's not be concerned about doing things efficiently all the time, but let's really think about how we acquire knowledge and how we understand things. Freeman Dyson is a physicist of the 20th century, British mathematician and physicist, moved to the United States to study. And while at Cornell University, he, even in his early or mid-20s, was resisting the pull to become a PhD or to earn a PhD. The physicist at this point in time, which was right at the end of World War II, was a very powerful, opinionated, and actually tough group. These were the physicists that created or invented the atomic bomb, and really probably considered themselves as having helped win the war in a significant way. And they're all highly educated, all geniuses, and really all PhDs, except for Freeman Dyson. And he didn't like the idea of a PhD program. I think he refers to them as prisons that lock you in for 2 or 3 years. And he describes himself as having an attention span that really can't put up with 2 or 3 years studying the same thing. Nevertheless, it's a qualification in a group like that. Well, anyway, there is another really famous physicist, Dick Feynman, American physicist. And Feynman is credited for having a more artistic explanation or graphic explanation of physics as opposed to the mathematical illustration, which, by the way, in researching this, it was interesting to see that Math is the way that physicists traditionally communicate their ideas. Well, Feynman used diagrams, and he kind of worked backwards into the math. And as the story goes, he was having trouble explaining his theories to Oppenheimer, head of the Manhattan Project, and all the other leading physicists at the time. And he was really doubting himself and really could not get his theory expressed. And along comes young Freeman Dyson, no PhD, 24 years old, comes to his aid and uses his knowledge of math, the translation, the language, to lay out Feynman's theories. And you can imagine what that would have taken. You got to think about that. You've been in situations where you're the least experienced person. Here is just a really strong set of personalities, accomplished, again, post-World War II. What does it take to challenge that group? But he did challenge the group, and he did help Feynman explain his theories. And Oppenheimer actually, as a result, offers him a tenured position over at Princeton, Institute of Advanced Studies. But the key thing about Dyson is that he was predisposed not to follow the group. So he wasn't constrained by the traditional rules of how you acquire knowledge, the educational track. He was more interested in the spirit or focused on finding things out for himself in his own way. And that's not to say that the people that go through PhD programs aren't like that. I'm sure they are. It takes a lot of intellectual endurance to get through a program like that. But what I like about that story is what it took for him to confront all these intellectual peers, many of whom were a lot older and experienced than he was. And I like this expression, epistemic humility, because what's important is not how much you know. It's how vigorously you pursue knowledge. And then a story about Oppenheimer and Freeman Dyson actually slipped a note under Dyson's door saying nolo contendere. He's essentially intellectually surrendering to the much younger and, I guess, less formally educated Freeman Dyson. So in the end, it took that person who had the lack of what they would probably consider intellectual or educational experience to break them out and make, in this case, Oppenheimer see that that was really valuable for him to do that. And there's value in people that can have a fresh perspective and really, just because the years don't add up, doesn't mean they're not able to contribute in meaningful ways. So what's the lesson for you and I as leaders is we have to make sure that we're not exclusively relying on the people that have been there the longest or maybe who are the most vocal. We have to go after the quiet ones or the new ones and make sure they're contributing. And a lot of times you have to bring that out. They're not going to do it on their own. Because if you give your new people or your less experienced people the feeling like they don't matter and they won't for a while, then they're not probably going to stick around. And not just that, but they do have those experiences that your organization needs that you're not seeing. Airbnb, 2007, 2008, the hotel industry, from what I've read, is largely based on maximizing, or was largely based on maximizing real estate space. So you pay so much per square foot of real estate, and you pack as much revenue producing features and values and mechanisms into that square footage or that acreage as you can. Well, as you can probably see coming, the founders of Airbnb, they were not pulled in that direction. They had no experience. In fact, they're both designers. They're not hospitality people. Came across the Airbnb, which stands for, if you don't know, Air, Bed and Breakfast. And the reason it's Air, you might think has something to do with the internet, but it's actually the first guest for the Airbnb back in the day was somebody that rented an air mattress in their apartment, and the breakfast was became Pop-Tarts. So you can see right there in that story, if they had have followed the square footage and revenue producing model that the whole hotel and hospitality industry is based on, there's no way to get there. It's a totally new idea. And as is the theme of this video, experience was not required. There was almost no reason to have any experience in the hotel industry. Pure client demand, pure innovation, experimentation. And now if you look them up, it's a global company. And it's a really good story. And you can only imagine the ridicule that they received or the naysayers. What did it really take to lean into that idea that was totally new? So you, with your team, give people that chance. Okay, 3 principles to help us guide our thinking. Number 1, consider, is your experience a map of what you intend to do or what you will do every day? A map is a good metaphor because a map charts what? The past. Doesn't tell you anything about the future. A compass will help you get to a new place, provide direction for you to follow. Number 2, protect epistemic freedom, or people who legitimately are curious and want to bring a new idea to the forefront. Be careful how much emphasis you place on people's experience. And another way of saying that is make sure you do value people with fresh perspectives. And number 3 is cliche. There's no dumb questions, but you really need to foster a culture or model a culture. This is your principle of thinking. Model a culture where you ask what might be perceived as the dumb questions or the very overly basic questions and set the tone for others to do the same, because you're going to uncover things that people aren't thinking of. And challenge your experts to explain why they think what they think. And it has to be more than we've always done it this way. 3 actions that you can start right away. Invite the unqualified people to the table. If you're always meeting with your most experienced senior people, bring in some of the less experienced and newer people and see how they change the dialogue and empower them to do so. Number 2 is do reflect on the past, but instead of assuming the good has always been good, really ask yourself why you think that. Because the more you know about memories, the more you realize we don't remember the full history of things. You remember the beginning and the end, and you remember how you felt at those points. You don't remember all of the ups and downs along the way. So a little bit more of a systematic analysis of why you think something is preferred will help you out. And then my favorite out of all of them is work to replace the been there, done that mentality with the principles of what your organization or your team is trying to do. Maybe it is the core values of your company, or maybe it is what you think is important to customers. Think in terms of those principles instead of simply what you've done in the past or relying on opinions of people who are constantly presenting those things. Principles like, how do we give the customer more of what they want? How do we get people on our team more involved? How do we expand our network to help us come up with collaborative solutions? Those are principles. And that's it. Hopefully this helps you out, helps you think a little bit different about how much value you place on experience. And that goes for your experience too. And this channel is about leading the team you have with what you have, not waiting for the team that's coming next year or a whole bunch of things to improve on their own. But what can you do today to make things better? So if this video hit home, consider liking and subscribing. If you'd like a coaching kit to have this kind of discussion with your people, my information's in the description. Until next time, lead the team you have, and we'll see you again. Thanks.